Okay, welcome everyone. This is our Kīlauea Eruption update information session. And we actually had planned on this at the end of last year, so we've been planning on it for a little while. And you never quite know how many folks are coming, so are going to be able to come, especially for our families who live a little far. So we are recording, and now it's going to be posted on our website as well as our Facebook page shortly. So I want to take the opportunity right now to introduce our guest expert panel. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Kalima Kinney, principal, Volcano School of Arts and Sciences. Even though I know all of you guys, but. So, speaking first, so what we're going to do is they're going to speak first, and then we're going to have a question and answer at the end. So this is Brian Shiro. So that again, Brian Shiro, supervisory geophysicist, leading seismology group at USGS. HBO, and he is also a parent, and he's also the vice chair of our governing board. So welcome, Brian. Thank you. We have John Broward, chief ranger, Hawai'i Volcanoes National Park, also a parent and formerly our governing board chair. We have John Peard, visiting is a project manager for the Department of Health and Hazard Evaluation Emergency Response Office in Hilo. Welcome, thank you so much. And Philip Ong, who is a geologist and a parent, and also a guide. And each of these folks are here at representing their agencies, and so the nice role that Philip's going to have for us is to be able to maybe say things in a way or that maybe other folks won't be able to say. But we're going to provide as much information as they have to share, and we'll get started with just a little brief update from each of them, and we'll save your questions for the end. We can bring your ladies. Yes, thank you very much. All right, thank you.
Let's start. Thanks, Kalima. So hi, I'm Brian Shiro from the USGS Hawai'i Volcano Observatory. I know most of you. We're going to talk about the eruption update. Certainly has changed a lot in the last week. We can go to the next one. And so I'm going to start the Lower East Drift and work my way up and focus mostly on the summit because that's what affects the school. But as most of you know, the activity down the Lower East Drift zone near Leilani waned on August 4th. It's been calming off ever since. In Fissure 8, there's what we'd be calling a puddle affectionately over the past several days. Lava is not getting out of the fissure. It's no longer filling the lava channel. The lava channel is deflated and mostly drained out. There is still active ocean injuries happening though at the far distal end as well, but those are also weakening. So far it's waned a lot, but the eruption is ongoing. So an eruption is defined as lava at the surface or gas at the surface, anything coming out of the ground. This is still coming out of the ground technically, so it's still an active eruption. That's worth stressing. We can go next, and it's just a picture from this morning. Can't see it very well, but you do see some incandescence there that indeed there is a little bit of lava still molten there inside Fissure 8. In fact, can you hit the light for just one moment for the benefit of people in the room? I know in the video they won't see it as well, but I like this too because it looks like a heart, the heart of the moment, of the moment. And if you go one more, Chris, this is that same view zoomed out a few days ago, but it hasn't really changed much. And you can see how that small bit of lava in the puddle, if you will, has gone down in height so much that the lava can't spill out anymore into the channel. So this is formerly what we call the spillway, which led into the channel. Okay. So moving on to the summit, which is what affects us here. Thankfully, who's sleeping better now? All of you, I hope. The earthquake activity also waned about the same time. By the next day, by about August 5th, it had mostly stopped as well. And what we think is that the shallow magma source beneath Kalima has mostly collapsed at this point. And we are still seeing some minor deflation in the South Caldera, suggesting that the lower, deeper South Caldera source is still reacting to this event. Now, the Kalima crater itself is expanded dramatically. We'll show some photos in a minute of that. But we don't see any signs of repressurization yet. That's the good news. So we're watching the tilt signals, the GPS signals, all the deformation signs that might indicate that magma is filling it back up. So far, none of that. And if that did happen, though, it could have a lot of implications. If the rate of it is slow versus if it's fast, is it going to go out to the east strip? Is it going to go into the summit again? There's a lot of variables there, but so far it hasn't started. Can you go to the next one? Hitting the earthquake point a bit more. Wanted to just show this remarkable plot. This is earthquakes per day over the past 4 months. Okay, so here's how what our normal levels were. Less than 100 per day, and then it ramped up to at its peak about 800 per day. And then now look at it now. It's even lower than it was when it started. And so this is the wild ride that everyone in Volcano has been on, literally. And throughout this sequence, there were 62 collapse events. Okay, 62, which were their own unique kind of signal. People were puzzling over if there are any papers about this being written in meetings, being set up just for that. But ultimately, what it is the caldera collapsing in and of itself due to the drainage of the magma. So if we go to the next slide, you can see a time-lapse video of what happened to the caldera, and this is as of the 12th of July, so this is 1 image per day. That's what you're seeing here. And let's let it loop through a couple of times. So here it is. This is June 26th there, July 3rd. Just keep watching. Okay, it started over again in April. You can watch it again. And this is taken from the HBO tower. There it goes down. And so the last measurement done by drones last week, or this week rather, was 640 meters from HBO to the bottom of this newer, bigger Kalima. Previously, it was about 80 meters. That's the change. And then the diameter has changed at least 4 times as big. Okay, we can go on. One more click. So there's the picture as of a couple of weeks ago. And if you click once more, you see the little label point to HBO. I say former HBO because we evacuated that facility. Don't know if we'll ever come back. Maybe, I hope so, but don't hold your breath. And you can see how dramatically different the crater is now. There are a lot of cracks in this area. Okay, go on to the next slide. I think we'll get into hazards. So just to round out this presentation, what is the hazard for the school? This is what we came here to hear. Well, the best news so far is that the SO2, the sulfur dioxide, which is one of the principal components of lung, is at its lowest level that we've ever measured in over a decade. Okay, so we're at pre-lava lake levels right now, which is good. So no real current hazard with that. There's still the ongoing. If we're downwind of other sources, we can still have it here, of course. The main hazard at the moment is additional earthquakes causing shaking of the area, or if you're in the park, rock falls or increased collapses around the caldera. So, and then another thing we're worried about is it's a little bit of an unknown at this point, but if groundwater does get into the deep magma chamber and interact with the hot rocks and hot magma down there, it could produce explosions. So that is one of the cases that we're watching closely. Okay, so one more, and just a few pictures of cracks and the effects that maybe John will talk about more, but you see sinkholes are one example. This is a crack in a road, and these are examples where the shaking is causing downdropping on existing weaknesses or cracks that were probably there ahead of time due to fill. And then there's Jagger overlook damage there. Okay, go next. So, my final slide, when will the eruption really be over? What does it mean to be over? Okay, so just go through this one by one. We don't really know is the bottom line, but there's no magic formula. There's no preset script for what's going to be finally all here. But go to the next one. However, we can look at the past. We can learn from the past. And in the 1955 eruption, for example, there were pauses as long as 16 days. If you look at the Mauna Ulu eruption, the pauses lasted, the longest one was 3.5 months. So it was not unprecedented for it to start up again. And as we know, down in the lower East Rift Zone, the magma is right there at the surface right now. All it takes is a little pushing to get out. What we're looking for is monitoring data to show nothing new is changing. So no new earthquake change in rates or patterns. Deformation data is not showing any resurgence or inflation of magma beneath the ground. We're not actually seeing that right now. So that actually agrees with the prognosis that maybe it's over, but it's only been 11 days. We want to wait longer just to be sure. Okay, we go next. So down in Lower East Rift, what we're looking for is, what we're seeing right now are some signs definitely pointing to the ongoing hazard. In addition to the risk of if you walk near the channel, you could fall in. There's a lot of falling hazards there. But in addition to that, there's hot cracks. There's actually elevated temperatures in some of the cracks over the past week. And it's some indication that the dike is certainly still active and right beneath the surface as the magma. So one more at the summit. And if we do see this pressurization of magma at the summit that we don't see right now, but if we do, it certainly could mean the system is changing. Ultimately, it will pressurize again. And that means the magma is returning from its deep source in the mantle. And at some point that will happen. And depending on how fast it comes in and where it actually goes, what cracks it finds, it'll define what happens. So we'll just have to watch and see. So that's it. I think there's one more. And thanks for your time. And we'll get here for questions.
When they restarted again, was it with more vigor in general, or can you say anything about that, maybe?
One of the interesting things about the resurgence in the past effort causes is that they seem to start sometimes without any geophysical signals, so without precursory earthquakes or deformation signs, which is one reason that, for example, the geologists especially are not going to call this over yet. And it's because we know that these pauses can happen with little fanfare. They can just start up again. I don't think the vigor is necessarily any different, or even any trend, more or less.
So John?
Okay, thanks. I just got 3 slides together, so I'm going to have to walk over here and see what's on the slide. I just kind of, it was last minute, so forgive me. So I have to stand over here so I can actually remember what's on there. So, move the lights off also, or at least comments. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the park's response, and of course the question that everybody's asking for the park is when are we going to reopen? Hopefully, can't answer the exact date, but I can hopefully answer some parameters that we're looking for. So, next slide. So this all started on May 4th. We basically went into what's called Incident Command System, or ICS, and I became the first rotation. I became Incident Commander, and we managed it as an emergency. And over the course of the last 3 months, we've had different we call incident management teams, or IMTs, come in to kind of run how we're doing things in the park. Of course, the superintendent, Cindy Orlando, she's the ultimate final say on what happens, and she's what we call the agency administrator. But the day-to-day operations were run by protection rangers, and then we had mainland teams from all over the country, which is one of the benefits of being a federal agency, is we can bring in resources from the mainland. This slide over here, I just wanted to kind of throw this in there. This is at the very beginning, the upper slide, like the first week, actually, like first month. And the bottom slide over here is this last week. And I thought it was an interesting slide because what we have here is we're discussing, we have the eruption event, and we have a fire going on at the same time. We have a hurricane, and we have a memorial planned for a firefighter that was killed. So there's 4 things that we're planning that day, and we're all giving each other briefings on each other's incidents. So it's kind of to show that where we're at in that. But we've used the same room ever since then. Okay, next slide. Picture, Brian already showed you some pictures. I cannot get a good picture of the caldera because it's so big now. It's almost impossible to get a good picture of it. Next slide. So some of our issues we have in the park, when we started having earthquakes, we had a lot of damage to our infrastructure. Most of the buildings didn't suffer as badly as HVO did. HVO took the worst hit of all the buildings. But the other thing we had was water lines. Water lines were breaking left and right everywhere in the park. And our maintenance staff would get out there and fix it. That's a photograph of them fixing it. So you can see how much time and energy goes into fixing one section of water line. Every 80 or 90 sections they have to fix. So they fix it, and then take them a whole day to fix it, and then boom, at night we'd have to break 5.3 and it would break again. And then you go to the next day and fix it, and it would break again. So at some point, we decided to give up on that, and we were using little cubic containers of water and porta toilets for about 2 months during that time period. So for us, they're still working in the park. Our facilities crew was able to put our own little independent water tank and pipe water into our building, so we actually have some water there. But in order to open the park back up again and start allowing visitors in, including field trips from the school, we have to have water. We have to have infrastructure repaired. And that's going to take a long time, a long time to get there. Next slide. Some pictures, Brian, I started some pictures of Jagger and HBO. This is the lookout over there, whereas you might remember we had 5,000 people a night going to see the glow. That's no longer a viable option because a good chunk of that is leaning on the edge of the caldera and slide in. The building is all cracked up everywhere. Next slide. The floor of Jagger Museum is all, there's just cracks everywhere. And they're running different directions, and there's sections of the wall that are cracked, and it's pretty sad, but pretty amazing at the same time to see how damaged it is. And this is a parking lot over here, just covered with ash and also lots of hookahs everywhere, lots of cracks, just all over the parking lot. Okay, next slide. This is out on Crater Drive, and this is one of the worst areas, which we haven't had open for cars for a long time anyhow, but we have places that are similar that are starting to form throughout the park. Next slide. This is actually going into Kīlauea Overlook, and that hole over here is at least 30 feet deep, and there's one side of it is actually can't see the bottom of it. And as you remember from when we had the glow in the park, we would put our overflow parking in that parking lot. That's impossible to do now, so there's no parking lot that's viable for us to put extra cars into. And then we have these kinds of holes everywhere, not just there, but the next slide. This is an area, this is going by KMC, and this is one of the reasons why we would not also utilize that as an escape route for people off Highway 11. They actually did ground penetrating radar for this section here as well as the highway, and you go over like a little push wagon, and it shoots a radar signal to the ground, and it comes back up, and then we can see where all the gaps in the land are. This area over here at KMC, there's multiple earth cracks, and there's multiple not fissures, but help me out, Brian.
Voids?
Voids. Another one I'm thinking of. Think in a second. I'll give a quarter, but we'll figure it out.
Fractures?
Is that?
Fractures?
Fracture, getting close. I'll think in a second. Can't believe we can't do this. Anyways, we have all these big holes, these big poopers everywhere, right? And so in some areas over here, the only thing that's supporting that road is the asphalt. And when we did the GPR over that area, it was pretty surprising. You look at some of the big holes in the ground that are underneath the ground. And some of the fractures run different directions, and there's multiple layers of different lava flows that kind of meet up and these kinds of things. So we're looking at underneath the ground, some of these areas are deeper than we can measure. And not very wide, but wide enough where a car going over that could fall into it and probably get wedged into it. They probably won't go all the way down. But so this is their KMC, and that's one of the worst areas in the park right now. There's no way we can safely get cars through there. We have one area that's covered with metal plates. Back over here, we have a little detour for park employees to get around in emergency vehicles, where you go over some metal plates, go through KMC, and back out the other side. But that's going to take a lot of work to fix that, a lot of work. Next slide. This is the other side of it. Kind of that's the opposite side. It doesn't look like much. You can still see asphalt there, but there's a big earth crack that runs at an angle too. So you can't just put metal plates over that section because it's just too long and it's at an angle. So that's an area we're going to have some other alternative engineering designs done on it. And this over here we have some of the trails that we've seen holes like that all over our trails. Where you're walking along a trail and there's a big puka there that's 15, 20 feet deep. Some places even deeper, some places only 3 or 4 feet deep. But those are everywhere we look. We're finding just holes everywhere. We don't even know how many there are because we haven't really surveyed the trails yet. Next slide. So this is to give you an idea. This is why we can't open the park right now, because this amount of cars in a single day would just not be feasible. It wouldn't be safe. Just, I kind of put this slide. This is pre everything happening. This is a typical day at Jagger Museum. And to allow 5,000 cars a day driving over those roads. And in some areas we don't know. We have no clue if it's going to give way or not. And we haven't surveyed every section of the road. So this gives us too many holes everywhere to even think about allowing that number of visitors back in the park again. Next slide. So this is Highway 11 because that's also a concern for parents bringing their kids to Volcano School. And I think the state highways person was going to address that tonight, but since he's not here, I can talk about what I know about Highway 11. Next slide. This is a typical hole at Highway 11. There's that sort of shake and fill thing going on where the road shakes and then it fills some gaps and things drop down, kind of sieve through the ground, and then the ground starts dropping lower in those areas. There's one section over there that's actually kind of sloughing off to the side, and most of these holes like that they can fix by dumping stuff into it and patching it up. And for the last 3 months or so, that's all they've been doing is filling and patching, filling and patching, filling and patching. We're going to start any day now to maybe next week, not really sure when. We're still coming up with the final plans on the drawing board. We're going state highways, support from the county and from federal highways. Is going to basically start ripping up in big sections of that highway and laying like this special kind of matting and filling and special kinds of layers of mat to kind of bridge across the earth cracks and start repairing that highway and make it back to a more usable highway. So in the beginning, they were hesitant about doing that because they kept having earthquakes constantly, and it was like, why spend $1 million to fix it when it's just going to break again? So we were just kind of putting band-aids over it. But let me tell you this, from talking and interacting with the state highways people, from people from civil defense and a variety of different agencies, it's a big commitment, it's a big priority for the county to maintain Highway 11 as an access route. And I know some of you have heard about the alternative options with Gulf Links Road and through the Kīlauea Ranch and things like that. Those are also still possibilities that might still be developed. It's kind of up to the county. It's not really a Park Service to decide on. But just from talking to some of these engineers and stuff, they're very concerned about Highway 11 and keeping that open. And even if we don't have a single earthquake again for the next 3 months, there's still a possibility of things dipping down and opening up. And we've seen that already. Last week, since earthquakes have stopped, we still see holes opening up here and there. So it's going to take a while to fix all this stuff. It's also going to take a lot of money, which we don't have right now. We have to procure funding sources to fix things in the park. Highway 11 is a little bit different story. They have federal highway money to fix that. It's required to keep that open, so they should be able to get from Cottonwood to Volcano. But in the park, it's going to be a little bit different. Next slide. But on this note with the slides, this is the KMC Theater, as you all recognize probably from spring musicals, and I know how sad it was to not be able to use that for spring musical this year. But having seen it, there are multiple cracks on the foundation. There look like cracks we can easily fix. We haven't found any issues with structural damage to KMC, so that I think, I believe, and I'm going on a limb here, but I believe that this theater will be available and we'll be having spring musicals again there next year, and we'll put all the stuff behind us and we'll have spring musical there again. So that's kind of where we stand for that. And basically, just to kind of summarize, right now, the analogy I like to use is with the pause in the earthquake and the uncertainty and not knowing if it's over, we don't want to jump into the deep end right now. because it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy to like go out there and start fixing everything. So we're hesitant about making a total commitment to fixing everything all at once, without knowing for sure if it has actually stopped. So our stance right now is we're just sticking our big toe into the water right now. We're just edging the water with a big toe. We started out this week with conversations about repair, bringing in specialists, we need geologists, geomorphologists, structural engineers, all these experts in their field. We're going to start bringing them into Hawaii, probably sometime in September, and start evaluating some of these buildings and the roads and things like that, and coming up with plans, and then trying to find money to fund these plans and those kind of things. So right now, we're just sticking our big toe in the water. Hopefully, within the next month, we can go up to our ankle, and who knows, maybe within a year, maybe 2 years, we can dive into the deep end. Some areas of the park might be opening sooner than others. We have to make some alternative arrangements to open it up. We're talking about possibility of guided trips or special van caravans and things like that. These are discussions we're just starting to have just this week. The fire we had kind of delayed us a week in those discussions. We got to focus our time on the fire and the hurricane. So we kind of got delayed and started those discussions sooner. Today was our first real discussion about what can we do to start moving that direction to open the park back up and allowing limited visitation at some point in the future. So hopefully, we'll be able to dive into deep end sooner rather than later. But some of these areas might take a couple of years before we get to fix it and open the public. And Jagger Museum and HVO is probably not going to ever be the same. So, any questions?
Before questions, I just want to add that I did just speak with Neil Azevedo, who's the Highway Division Chief for County of Hawaii, to get an update on the highway and also on the bypass road. And so he said they're getting their supplies and their gear in place right now. And as soon as they get the okay to start construction, it will take 2 weeks to complete. And that's the bypass, for those of you that aren't aware, that goes up through Golf Links Road, or the golf course, and actually exits right at the exit of the school. So Neil's going to be coming up to meet with us next week to make sure that that's done in a manner that will be safe for our students and all of you guys. So now if there's any questions for John.
No questions? Okay. Well, we have questions later on. I'll be around afterwards.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So the park is a very big place, and it's a lot of land beyond just that immediate affected area. And why is the park not able to open up some of those other areas?
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up, because I do want to point out that Kahuku is still open. The Kahuku Ranch is still open. Right now, they're open 5 days a week, but if we start opening other areas at some point, we're going to have to scale back the hours in order to shift that staff back to the section of the park. Basically, that one slide, with the visit was showing the cars there. The only place where we could actually probably allow people in, if we were to open, would be the Kīlauea Visitor Center. We can't allow people near front country trails because the cliff edges can collapse. We can't allow people to go down certain roads because the roads aren't viable. So to bring in 5,000 people a day and have them go to Kīlauea Visitor Center and watch a park movie is really the only place people could go if we were able to open it up.
What about like Mauna Strip Road area?
Mauna Strip Road right now, because of the fire, that's one reason why it's closed. We're starting to look at opening up the Mauna Strip Road, but then the fire occurred, and so we have pushed our decision on that back further. And the other issue with Mauna Strip Road is there's issues with the highway just before you get to Mauna Strip Road. So like by Mana and milepost 29 to about 32 or 33, and there's cracks that we found and like issues with the road further Kīlauea direction. So that if something big were to happen, or if there's something that hasn't happened yet that's going to happen, and that road were to collapse, we wouldn't be able to get access to Mauna Strip Road and get people out of there. The other issue is we were trying to figure out if we did have 5,000 people a day coming in, how are we going to park cars from 5,000 people a day? And we thought, oh well, we'll have a reservation system, but then cars are going to start backing up on the highway, and that's not going to work. And so we ran across a lot of ideas. We looked at the parking lot, and I think we came up with like 120 or 140, something like that, car spaces. And when we had 1,400 cars a day, to put 1,400 cars a day into that small spot, it just wasn't. We couldn't think of a feasible way of actually doing that.
Was there any discussion on having just more like structured groups and tours, like for schools, for example?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we just started a conversation recently, and we brought up on management team meeting today, and Ben Hayes is the chief of interpretation and education. And the other thing with him right now is the position, as you might know, for the Environmental Education Center has been vacant. That person who's coordinating school groups, that position was vacant. We just hired somebody who's going to start in October. But he's trying to juggle all these different aspects. He can't do it by himself. So, when that position's hired, maybe we can take a look at that. There's no guarantees, but we just have to make sure it's safe and accessible for everybody, especially school groups in my mind.
Yeah.
And having said that, I'm also a parent as well. My daughter's in 7th grade, and I want to make sure that she comes to park that she's safe as well. So, okay. Any questions? Other questions?
As I've heard, the earthquakes have stopped for now. Is it going to start up again?
Okay, question. Brian, I think.
So, the earthquakes are back down to pretty much the level they were before it started. So we're still getting a few tens of earthquakes a day in the summit area, which is normal for the summit. Most of these earthquakes are still showing motions consistent with collapsing those. There are still small areas downdropping and cracks and faults around the caldera. So it's not all settled yet. It probably won't be for years, honestly. But when the major large collapse sequence is finally done, if it is already done, will be, I think, in part tied to the magmatic system underground, the magma and all the cracks that it finds underground. So at this point, we think it's not reached its final equilibrium state. So there's definitely could be more. We don't want to call the hazard over just yet.
Okay, if no other questions for John, we'll move on to another John Peard, Department of Health. Thank you so much for coming.
Since I'm the one here without a student at the school, I'll mention that I'm a one-person office in Hilo for a branch of the Department of Health called the Hazard Evaluation and Emergency Response Office, or the HERE office for short. And I typically work on soil and groundwater contamination issues, and schools have lots of those as well. I've worked with schools on those issues. But during these eruptive events, I've been fortunate to be able to I have an industrial hygiene background, and so I've been brought in to help out on various efforts from the HERE office. Our clean air branch is the typical one dealing with air pollutant, but their mandate is to do permitted sources, like an industry with a source that they can give a permit to and measure. So they actually, ironically, don't have anybody working on VOG. They do have a large staff working on air monitoring stations. You see these stations about and putting up new stations. You hear a lot about that. And they do that work as part of a national monitoring network. So that's a lot of support that they do sort of under a different angle there. In any case, I've been focusing on looking at VOG issues and working with folks at USGS and others, the International Volcanic Health Hazard Network. And after the 2008 eruption and before the 2014 flows down into Pahoa, we worked on this VOG dashboard. Hopefully you've all heard about the VOG dashboard. It's a one-stop shopping for everything we know about VOG. We put everything up on this one site, so you can go to one site. Before that, you go to 40 sites and try to find it. So we've collected them here. We've tried to organize them in different topic areas that you might logically go to. If you have a catchment, there's a section on catchments. If you're worried about agricultural issues, there's stuff on agriculture. And the newest section here has a school bus picture on it. And so we've just recently posted a section on schools where we're putting all the information that we have that's more specific to schools and school protective issues. And we're adding to that since it's relatively new. And I wanted to mention that that's one place you can go. You can access all these documents. Now I copied and brought you some of the key documents that are posted up there initially, so you'll have copies. And they sort of fall out. I just mentioned that on the VOG dashboard, just remember there's all this other information. If you want good background information, there's sections on our general guidance that tells you basic information about blog. Of course, we're monitoring two major contaminants in the bog, SO2 and particulate matter, fine particulate matter. And it's an important distinction because it matters when it gets down to what kind of air cleaner do I buy, where I live, do I have to worry about one or both of those contaminants. Those folks on the west side that were not long ago experiencing heavy levels of fog were just exposed to particulates. There was no SO2 over there because by the time the winds bring it over there, the SO2 has transformed into particulates. And so that's interesting. So they would choose a different air cleaner than you would here because you're exposed to potentially both SO2 and particulates here. So those are important distinctions, and so people can educate themselves about that, and that helps you make a choice down the road about protecting yourself. And so there's lots of general information that explains that to you if you want on the VOG dashboard. There's what is VOG with all the basic information on it. But focusing in now on the schools section there, two basic kinds of information. First, there's these plans. Two of them are very colorful. And then there's one on asphalt that is less colorful. So there's three plans that are posted up here that were designed for schools to kind of address those particular contaminants that I mentioned. And then in 2008, we weren't dealing much with asphalt, but more so this eruption. So we've added this asphalt. We actually developed the SO2 action plan for schools back in 2008 after that eruption, eruption. And so we kind of spruced that one up and then went on to do one for particulates, particularly for the west side schools that were very concerned about the increase in levels of particulates over there. And again, for asphalt that we had some experience with this time around. So this is an action plan for the schools to say at what level, what might I do to protect students and staff. And it's broken down based on concentrations of those contaminants. So it's all based on having monitoring data. So you have to rely on monitoring data to implement this plan, and it's all color-coded to kind of match those concentrations. But the key is you have to have some monitoring data to know when to do that and know when to implement protective action for the students or staff. And that's the catch, really. And I know this school has gone a long way. Chris was telling me about the various monitors you have here. There's an MIT monitor, you've got your own monitor, and I know there's, at the Cooper Center, there's both SO2 and particulate monitors. So there are monitors around Volcano, and you can look at them. And of course, the park still has their monitors going up at the visitor center. I think the Jaeger Museum one eventually had to go, but and it's interesting. You can look at those, and you'll have different levels, and they're all pretty close. We're all right here. So which one do you trust and believe? Well, ultimately, they also bought a handheld monitor to say, well, what is it right here? So that's yet another way that this school and others have chosen to further protect themselves, to get a handheld meter to say, what is it right here? Because the concentrations are blowing on the wind, so they can be quite variable. And we do know in general when levels are going up, and that's good to look at all those monitors then to get a sense of, yeah, things are increasing all over, the winds have died down, and things are just building up kind of thing. But to get really down to a specific area, it's really hard to nail it down without some specific monitoring data. So it's good that schools are investing in their own monitoring equipment and that sort of thing to get that. And this school has gone further than most to draw in monitoring devices that they can rely on and look at. So those are the action plans, the basic action plans. Then other information that we've more recently put out is just a letter, basically information for parents, primarily. It's called Protecting Keiki from Bog. And it goes through, and it's recognizing that parents have the same issues at home that they might have in school in terms of the bog issues. And recognizing that these issues translate to your home as well as to the school, and providing you information about what resources you can go to the VOG dashboard and where specific information is, and to address concerns you might have about your child and protective measures. And then most recently, we posted something on called the Taking Care of K-12 Students During Eruption Events. So this is written really to teachers and staff, that they're on the front lines to recognize if their students are having issues, bring them to your health designee or your nursing assistant or whatever you have available at the school to get any help that might be necessary. And it talks all about, a lot of emphasis on these programs are on kids with asthma, because they're more sensitive than those that don't have pre-existing respiratory disease. And these levels, they sort of go through a ramping up, and this letter within the orange range here means that those kids that might have a pre-existing respiratory condition might suffer health effects, whereas kids that don't might not. So there's kind of that intervening range that we've got to really watch those kids. Those are the kids that are more sensitive and need more attention. So a lot of this information is aimed at staff or students that might have asthma. I've also included here the most recent information I could find on the asthma prevalence, both adults and children in the state. We have one of the higher rates on the island as well as statewide of asthma. And so there are quite a number of folks out there that we need to take care of and be watching out for and make sure they get the proper care. And so a lot of this information focuses on them, making sure that their parents have worked with their physician to develop asthma action plans. They share that information, or working with the schools, coordinating as appropriate, and that sort of thing. And at least on the DOE schools, I know there are laws and procedures at which kids can self-carry their meds at school and or keep them at school. Same here. And that's a very important aspect, because basically people that are sensitive, there's sort of a sequence of events that you can take to protect those people. The first thing is stop them from running around outside, because they're sucking in air deep into their lungs when they're running around, they're hyperventilating, and that's the worst case scenario of getting exposed to the sulfur dioxide gas. Particularly is particularly irritating, a higher health hazard and more irritating than the particulate matter. And being closer to vents, you're more exposed to the SO2 gas than someone further away. So that's important to recognize and deal with. So the first thing would be to stop running around and hyperventilating. From there, it's get inside. Generally, when inside, the buildings are a little more protected than outside. The levels are lower inside than outside. Even in a not very tight building, it'll be somewhat lower and somewhat protective for at least a short length of time. And many of the peaks, if you look at the monitoring data, many of the peaks are short. So if you can get someone inside, even for a short time, it may that peak might go by. Like I say, it blows on the wind, and all of a sudden you might have a better air condition, and therefore you've protected that student by bringing them indoors. And then various measures to then harden that indoors to make it a tighter space, so that keeps that infiltration from the outside air from coming in as fast as it would in a wide open, tight building. And as you know, we have a lot of our school buildings here are old on the island, and so that's a challenging issue. The Department of Education is stepping up to that issue. You'll see in these plans, they're mentioning that all their schools are designating sensitive rooms. These are rooms in which they're trying to protect to a greater extent than the whole school. And so they're typically choosing an interior room that has less outdoor windows if they can. They're buying special air cleaners to put in the room to kind of filter air that might infiltrate and that sort of thing. And they've taken other measures by years to actually monitor and make sure that's a more protected space. So they've gone to that, and now they're ranking up a notch. They've recently got a substantial sum of money in which they're going to start work on building larger spaces inside certain schools that are more protected, that will be protected basically with air cleaners and that sort of thing, and provide more protective space for a larger number of students. So they are embarking on that, and they have secured money and a contract to start that, which is good news now that things are quiet again, because you know, they never know how people are going to turn their back when everything dies down all of a sudden. So that's a great effort that they've started, and it's good that they've stepped up to the plate. One other significant thing is they just signed a person from Oahu who's lived on island for a year to work on school-related issues. Her name is Orasa Fernandez. I don't know if you've met her, but her work will be on VOG and other emergency response issues, and she'll be coordinating for DOE on those issues. So they're adding that resource over here too, which is great, and she can work on the various efforts that are going on. So remember to watch that schools information section on the VOG dashboard at the bus image there. And if you have any suggestions on what we could add there that would be useful for you in a school's information section, we're wide open at this point. We're looking for what would be best to put up there, and we're looking to the schools to say what other resources do you need or may have that we could put up there that would be useful for other schools. We want to share as much information as possible as well.
Any questions? John here? Actually, I think we're okay.
You were mentioning earlier that the SO2 turns into particulate matter. If you could elaborate on that a little bit, and also the N93 mass, is it N93 that is all over N95?
N95, yes.
That are they useful for either or both?
Yes. Well, your first question, yes. So SO2 is a significant component of if it was coming out. Of course, the levels have dropped. They're virtually non-existent at the summit, and they're very low at the lower east rift zone. But still, there is some SO2 coming out there, hundreds of tons instead of tens of thousands of tons. So much lower levels, but they're still coming out down there. And it may be, let's see, in 2008 when I saw the measurements, about 10 or 12% of the emissions coming out of those out of the vents was SO2 gas. And it's as soon as it hits the air, it starts converting and breaking, transforming into tiny particulates, either tiny liquid or solid droplets. The liquid droplets would be primarily sulfuric acid droplets, the acid rain. And the solid particulates are again, acidic sulfate particles that are tiny in the air, and that's what causes the fog that you see. Those tiny particulates, either liquid or solid, in the air. The sunlight bouncing off those causes what appears to be fog or fog. And so the SO2 gas doesn't cause that. Its transformation product does, the particulates. So the further you get away, the less SO2 from the source, the less SO2 you have, and the more particulates you have. And such that our monitor that's been over in Captain Cook area for years and years, we've never monitored a significant level of SO2 over there over the years. And so that's interesting, that close. The SO2 is going, and that's good for them. The SO2, as I said, has greater health effects, more irritant, more respiratory irritant than our particulates. And particulates are a little bit harder to deal with because remember, particulates is just any particle that gets weighed on those monitoring machines. It could be from your car, it could be from a dust cloud, it could be from smoke. That's going to be measured as particulate matter, that fine particulate matter. So it doesn't discriminate for just this is volcano particulates, but in most cases, the majority of it is, we believe it is, if there's not a fire going on or a dust cloud coming from a gravel pit that's going through the area where the monitor is. So that's the story on that. So in a matter of hours to a day or so, the SO2 gas that comes out of the vent interacts with the atmosphere and transforms into these tiny particulates, which is very interesting and important to know. And then your second question about the mass. So yes, those particulate mass, N95s, are affected for particulates only, not SO2. The gas goes right through them, right? So you don't want anybody to have a false sense of security, like running around here saying I'm protected wearing one of those, because you could get a false sense of security and you're exposed to both SO2 gas and particulates here. It's not doing anything for the SO2. But for particulates, say you lived on the west side, it would be effective at filtering those, and actually you can, or a week ago, you can see people walking around over there or wearing
I
it.
live in Nat'l, so that's...
Yeah, you get significant particulate exposure down there. So it actually does. The issue is whether you're adequately protected. Unfortunately, they don't make them for students, for kids. They do make small, medium, large adult sizes, but they're generally not available. There's 2 models that are certified by the European standards, not by the US standards. That one's made in Singapore and the other's made somewhere else that claim they are, but you don't commonly see them around here. Most of the N95s you see around here are all adult models. Now, a small adult might fit a teenager, not pretty well. The only way you can tell if they fit is to do a real fit test, which is challenging it with an irritant agent and making sure that isn't going through there. So a lot of them were passed out by the Department of Health without this fit testing and everything. They were passed out for ash, thinking they're better than nothing. And we're not fooling ourselves and thinking that every person that's going to wear one is going to be 100% protected. That's not the case. You'd be lucky if 25% of them were, because of this issue of it not being fit. Everybody has a different face fit. You'd have to have 5 different models to get everybody fit tested right. So, but if it protects a little bit, it's a little bit better than nothing. But they weren't passed out generally to say wear them all the time, and we think they're great, and everybody will be 100% protected. So keep that in mind. For particulates, it may be better than nothing, and unfortunately, they're not. Most of the ones that you see aren't made for kids, and so our recommendation for kids is keep them indoors during significant events.
Is that just here? Because we were sold masks, as I signed the invoice that said child size.
Oh, were you? Okay.
So we can follow up with that.
Yeah, we can look at that. Like I say, I'm not aware that there may be one manufacturer. Maybe someone reached out and got that one manufacturer, and we can look and see what the certification is. But like I say, I don't know that it probably wouldn't be labeled N95. It would be labeled with the European standard, because I'm not sure anyone has been certified N95. That's a child size, to my knowledge, but we can look at it.
And just one question, because some people that came in after our first Brian's presentation, is just to speak for a moment on the current levels, SO2 levels.
Yeah, very, very low. As I said, there's, from what I know, there's virtually nothing coming out of the summit. And then the lower east rift zone, last measurement I heard about was August 5th or 6th in there, and they were a couple hundred tons, whereas just not long before it was on the order of 60 to 70,000 tons coming out. So a huge difference. As far as our monitors that are down there, I think our monitors are picking up and say, well, PPCal just below the vent, but not significant levels out and about yet, because the levels are so low. So of course, the rate of emission is a huge factor in how much SO2 is generated and how much particulates then are generated from the transformation of the SO2 gas.
One more question about so we have ash all over the place, and then the wind picks it up and carries it to where I live in Amigo. How is that's still SO2 then, or I'm not that?
Yeah, no, the ash is actually rock, pulverized rock, so it's not the hazardous component as SO2 is, right?
So it's not possible that that has combined somehow, I mean, that it clings together and that it still carries its...
I don't, perhaps the ash might be slightly acidic being in this environment, but no, generally it's not considered toxic per se. The big issue with ash is it's very abrasive and sharp. And as far as schools concerned, the biggest issue that I've heard about is eye injuries. So kids getting it in their eyes and then, you know, having to get treatment to flush their eyes and get that out of there. So I don't know if you're having a big issue with that and your kid has some nice comfortable swim goggles or something that can keep the ash out of their eyes. And obviously trying to avoid that, watering the ash into the ground. Eventually it'll incorporate into the ground, of course, but a big issue with ash is reentrainment after it, not only during the ashfall event, but then if you have accumulations, you know, it could be kicked up and blown around. Every car that goes by is shooting it up, so you got to keep watching that, and that can be a huge issue, especially in a big ashfall. Luckily, the ones we've experienced have been minor, and they got even less and less over time. So I don't know that we've experienced big accumulations that Public Works has had to go out and clean up and things like that.
No, there was one at the beginning where it was like 70,000 feet, I mean the tallest ash plume.
Yeah, right at the
And
beginning
in
there were
Ocean View,
some.
they had like a layer and we had some actual real deposits, but not much.
Yeah, after it rained, it pretty much went away. I was down there afterwards and couldn't see much evidence, but yeah. So it really depends on, again, the amount of the ashfall, but it's a good point that reentrainment of the ash can be significant, but the ash hazards are usually related to eye and abrasion issues and also kind of scraping the paint on your car and other things. Yeah.
Thank you. Last but not least, Philip Ong. This is filling some gaps, geologist, and for those of you that haven't seen, Philip has been one of the key folks in keeping communities informed in a short time about what's going on in the lower East Rift Zone particularly. We've been really enjoying your updates on the Facebook.
Yes, that's what I'm going to be offering my perspective. You know, seems like it wasn't that long ago. We were all at the end of last school year, and we were all wondering what's going on with the earthquakes and how we're going to deal with all this, and what's going to happen next, and what's even possible. And in comparison from then to now, we've had a lot of practice dealing with all the hazards that we have around the volcano. We know that the road can crack. We know the gas can crack. We know the ash. We know all the things we've practiced. We have experts sitting here who are telling us all the things they're doing to keep us informed and make decisions. And you know, not only that, we have like the best scientists in the world here, Dr. Volcano, the most Dr. Volcano in the entire planet, I would say. The most science done in this eruption for the longest time. So we have that going for us also. You know, I'm also a parent here. I think it's totally safe for my kids to be here. You know, I think there might be one day or another that something crazy happens. One day something crazy happens, but you know, that could be one event like they have in Kansas. They don't have to come around to deal with that one day or another, right? So I think one day here, one day there, something happens, we have to deal with it, don't really see coming. For the most part, we've had a lot of practice dealing with what's possible in this volcano. Actually, we're looking for very historic times. So, there's a lot of people who haven't seen this scale of change in this volcano in their entire lives. And here we are, and here are our kids who get to experience and see this if we can do it. And we're going to make assurance with them. And it may take years to see all the different parts of it. But that's going to be an adventure for them. It's going to be something that's irreplaceable that no one else in the world is going to get. So I think we're really about the treasure about where we are, despite the fact that we live with volcano, we're the closest school to the volcano anywhere, right? That's true. So, but there are other places that are got its own challenges, right? And so I think it's a really unique, really special, really blessed situation we have that we can have our families here. We all live here for a reason, and we're attracted in some way to this dynamic, raw, changing, powerful landscape, right? And so we're witnessing that, and that's awesome. just gotta find a way to once we address all of our concerns for safety and everything else, to be able to pass that passion out to the kids. Right, and that's what the school's all about. And so I'm actually pretty excited. That this has happened during the summer, right? That we have a chance to, assess what was going on and, practice doing this and assess and kind of see the whole range of things that need to possibly happen. We've seen a whole range of things that probably beyond we thought could happen all at one time in a short period of time. And, so we've learned a lot, right? So that's just the little perspective I want to offer to you guys, There's a lot happening clearly. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know that what's happened before will predict what will happen again in the future. We know that this volcano is one of the most active anywhere. And it's, like Brian said, it's not if it's going to inflate again, it's when it's going to inflate again. It's just a matter of time. It could be weeks or months or it could be years. And regardless of what it is, we're going to be eager to see what that journey that adventure actually is. And we live here in a place that is going to erupt again, and most often it's within a year or 2 years, like almost always fairly quick. And so we're going to expect to see change. We're going to see something change. We're going to see something else to deal with at some point. Like I said, we kind of practiced doing all this, right? So I think that we're well positioned to send our kids to school here, and we're all extra aware, obviously, right? Everyone's telling them to be extra aware of where they are. So there's that we all have got all that going for us already, and now we just gotta roll with it. So I think I'll leave it at that, keep it brief. And Leighton, take any questions and we can go from there.
I have a question about down on the former Kapoho area and the current Kahiki area. I noticed that there's a big sandbar and some beaches and hot ponds and stuff. Do you think that people will be able to walk over the cool lava and go to those areas anytime in the future?
Anytime in the future? Absolutely. That's a long time. I've heard that some people are getting excited already trying to do that, trying to walk in already. So they're actually getting across the flow and getting excited and excited. So it is possible. We shouldn't do it. But it is possible, there's also talks by the community, just like there was bulldozing checkers for an emergency where people were trying to get back in there, not to go surfing or go to the beach, but to go back to their houses and check in their houses. There's been a lot of fires and there's looters in there, and it's the first priority to go back in and check on, to establish paths for residents who are actually there. But at some point, they'll lead off to beach access and swimming access and boat ramp access and all that. But that's going to be a delayed thing. And I wouldn't expect any time real soon, because as far as officially getting a county to open up access through there's going to be first period of time that passes without anything else happening. Then a period of time for the county to assess that nothing else has happened. I think they've thrown out a number of 6 months or something like that, before that was a policy on the chain of craters. Before rebulldozing, we're going to wait a certain amount of time, and I'm not sure if the policy will change. I would expect not. So it'll probably be another 6 months from there. Right, and then you can do your engineering and actually do all the work. So as far as the actual county or state access, it's going to be a while. But I think that's the thing I like to bring up in front of the beaches, because a lot of people have actually had the chance to see how much devastation there's been in all this, but there's also been a huge amount of creation, right? There's been a lot of things that we're going to discover there, like new beaches and new bays and fishing points and surf breaks and things like that. They're all there. They're all still forming and adjusting. The currents are moving the sand, the ground is settling, the waves are coming and crashing, there's tremors in the ground is settling, all that stuff's all happening. So it's all still being created as we speak. And the same thing is true in the park. We don't know what it's going to look like. And it doesn't, to me, it's perfectly fine in parks that we're going to stand as it had before. It's going to be awesome, and it's a new incarnation, whatever it happens to be. So the short answer is that it's possible to go there, but it's not time yet. Right? I think the most important thing is to respect people whose homes are there still. And we're most worried about their house, and if there's access in there, who's going to be going through their house? Do they feel comfortable living there? And if they don't, who's going to be watching their house? People are walking through their own time. Right? So that really, there's a lot of complex issues with access. Anything else? Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you. So if you all go home and you think, oh, I have this burning question and I just didn't think about when I was there, please, I guess you can email me. That's probably the easiest email to remember, and then we'll forward it on and see if we can get more answers. Thank you all for coming tonight, and please drive safe on your way home. We will have this posted on our website and our YouTube channel, and very soon on our brand new Facebook page, which will be coming out very soon. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for giving your time and your expertise.
No nawe kahala no puna e kawahine no kalua no I Kīlauea Kelei mai lau kaula I ke kai o ka ma lama lama o ni I hau ua mali